The courtroom was silent, holding its breath like the rest of us. Emily Saunders sat at the witness stand, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. For 8 years, no one had heard her voice. Everyone believed she couldn't speak, couldn't hear, that her world was locked behind an invisible wall of silence. But now, her lips parted. "I'm not deaf," she said. Her voice cracked, unfamiliar even to her own ears. "I never was." Gasps filled the room. Her mother, Lydia, broke into sobs. Her father, Richard, stared ahead, frozen, pale as a ghost. Emily's eyes didn't move from him. I just couldn't listen to him anymore. Every word he spoke felt like a wound. Pretending not to hear was the only way I could survive. For 8 years, she had crafted a world of silence, her only protection from the emotional prison she lived in. She wore that silence like armor, convinced that one sound, one reaction, could shatter her fragile shield. No one knew what Emily had truly endured, not until now. And in that single moment, one sentence, she didn't just speak, she broke free. Don't miss stories that reveal the hidden strength inside us all. Subscribe now and hit the bell to join a community where every voice matters. Be the first to uncover the next powerful journey. Don't let it pass you by. Your story belongs here. Stay with us. Before the silence, there was music. Emily Saunders was 8 when the world still had sound. She lived in a modest 2-story home in upstate New York, in a quiet neighborhood where every house looked the same, but told a different story inside. To the outside world, the Saunders family was picture perfect. Richard, the hard-working father, Lydia, the gentle mother, and Emily, their bright, bubbly daughter with an untamed love for singing. Emily had a voice that sparkled. She'd sing in the mornings, hum through homework, and perform in front of the mirror with a hairbrush as her microphone. Music was her sanctuary, the place she went when the world felt too big or too quiet. Her dream was simple: to be heard, to stand on a stage and feel the echo of her voice reach someone's heart. But in their home, Emily's voice didn't bring joy. Her father, Richard, had no patience for noise, especially not a little girl's songs. He called it racket, told her to shut it, to act like a proper young lady. The scolding started as sharp words, but it wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Cold, calculated, final. Lydia tried to soften things. She'd whisper to Emily at bedtime, "Sing when he's not home," or "Just keep it down." But Emily could see it, the fear in her mother's eyes. Lydia was a ghost of the woman she used to be, drifting through life, careful not to stir the air. Emily learned early how to read moods, how to tiptoe around tension, how to silence her laughter before it became too loud. Still, she clung to her voice, hiding songs in her head, whispering melodies into her pillow at night. But every day, it got harder. Her father's eyes lingered longer. His silences grew heavier. His words, when spoken, cut deeper. The warmth in the house faded, replaced by a cold, invisible pressure. A weight that pressed down on Emily's chest, even when she was smiling. And then one day, the pressure became too much. The music stopped. She stopped. Emily's dream wasn't grand. It wasn't fame or money. It was something much simpler. Freedom. The freedom to sing whenever she wanted, to express joy without fear, to be fully herself. She had her first real taste of that freedom at school. Mrs. Donna Blake, her third-grade teacher, was the kind of adult who noticed things. She saw the way Emily's eyes lit up when music played. She invited her to join the school talent show, gently encouraging her with a warmth Emily rarely felt at home. Emily chose a soft, hopeful song, something about rising above the storm. She practiced after school in empty classrooms, her voice growing steadier each day. For the first time, she felt seen, not just looked at, truly seen. The night of the talent show arrived. Lydia came, sitting in the back row with a tense smile. Richard didn't. He said school events were a waste of time. But when Emily stepped onto that stage, the world changed. She sang like she was pouring out her heart. The crowd, students, teachers, even some parents, rose in applause. Mrs. Blake clapped with tears in her eyes. Emily looked into the audience and saw her mother smiling, really smiling for the first time in months. In that moment, Emily believed that maybe her voice had power. That maybe, just maybe, she wasn't invisible. The next morning, she woke early, still glowing from the night before. She skipped into the kitchen, the medal from the show clutched in her hand. "Dad, I sang last night," she said, holding up the ribbon. Everyone stood up. They clapped for me. Richard didn't even look up from his newspaper. "You embarrassed yourself," he muttered. "Don't waste your time chasing dreams that don't matter." Emily froze. "What? I said you sounded ridiculous. Singing isn't a future, it's noise. Learn something useful." His voice wasn't raised. He didn't yell, but his words landed like bricks. Heavy, crushing, final. Emily's medal lowered. Her smile faded. She nodded silently and walked out of the kitchen, her steps slow, her shoulders slumped. That afternoon, she didn't sing. That night, she didn't hum. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the applause from the night before fading into a hollow echo. A piece of her dream had just been buried by the man who was supposed to protect it. It happened just 3 weeks later. Emily had been unusually quiet at school. Mrs. Blake noticed, but Emily just smiled and said she was tired. She wasn't. She was shrinking. Inside. One evening, Emily was sitting on the living room floor, working on her homework, while humming softly to herself. It was barely audible, a tune she couldn't help but let escape. Music had always been her comfort, her instinct, her friend. She didn't hear Richard's footsteps until it was too late. "What did I tell you about that noise?" Emily flinched, turning around slowly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to," he snapped. "You're not listening again. Maybe you're just stupid. Maybe you are deaf." He stormed off, slamming the door to his office. Emily sat frozen, eyes wide, heart pounding. The words echoed louder than any scream. She stood up and walked to her room, closed the door, sat on her bed, and made a decision. The next morning at breakfast, Lydia asked her a question. Emily didn't answer. Lydia repeated it. Emily just stared ahead. Richard raised an eyebrow. "What's this? Now you're pretending you can't hear?" Emily didn't flinch. He waved a hand in front of her face. No reaction. And that was it. The beginning of silence. Days passed, then weeks. Emily didn't respond to anyone. Teachers contacted her parents, doctors ran tests, but nothing physical was found. They called it psychological trauma. Selective mutism, maybe a reaction to stress. Richard scoffed. "She just wants attention." But deep down, Emily knew what she was doing. If she didn't hear, she couldn't be blamed. If she didn't speak, she couldn't be hurt. She wasn't just pretending to be deaf. She was creating a shield, a world where his words couldn't reach her. A fortress made of silence. The school adjusted. She was moved to a different class, one for students with special needs. Her world got smaller, quieter, but safer in a twisted way. At night, Emily would lay in bed and listen to the house creak, to her mother cry behind closed doors, to her father mutter angrily in another room. She heard everything, but she responded to nothing. And no one, not even Lydia, knew that her silence wasn't a symptom. It was a choice. One that Emily believed might be the only thing keeping her alive. The silence became routine. At school, Emily was placed in a program for students with hearing impairments. She learned basic sign language, but never used it unless required. She watched the world from a distance, responding with nods, blinks, and sometimes nothing at all. Her teachers tried to connect, but she kept them at arm's length. There was safety in distance. At home, things stayed the same, or maybe worse. Richard, convinced the silence was just a phase or an act, mocked her constantly. "Still playing mute?" he'd say with a smirk. "Must be nice not having to answer for anything." Lydia hovered in the background, fragile and afraid, always doing just enough to keep peace, but never enough to protect. Emily stopped expecting anything from her. By the time she was 12, Emily no longer felt like a child. She felt like a ghost in her own life, present but unseen. She stopped trying to make friends. At recess, she sat alone under the oak tree behind the school, tracing words into the dirt with her fingers. Words she'd never speak aloud. Sometimes she'd write songs in her head, entire melodies with no sound. She imagined herself on a stage again, but now the audience was empty. No one to hear, no one to applaud. She missed her voice. She missed herself. One day, a new girl named Jasmine transferred into her class. Bright, curious, fluent in sign language. Jasmine introduced herself to Emily with a big smile and hands that moved quickly. Emily blinked, confused. Jasmine slowed down, fingers spelling out, "Hi, I'm Jasmine. Can we be friends?" Emily didn't respond, but Jasmine kept trying. Every day she'd wave, sit next to Emily at lunch, sometimes signing silly jokes or drawing little cartoons in her notebook and passing them across the table. At first, Emily ignored it all. Then, slowly, she started nodding back, then a small smile, then a written reply. Okay. For the first time in years, Emily felt someone reach into her silence without trying to force her out of it. Still, the fear never left. At home, her father remained unpredictable. One night he caught her watching a YouTube video of a girl singing. "You don't need that garbage," he muttered, yanking the tablet from her hands. "No point in dreaming if you're broken." Emily didn't flinch, but inside something cracked. That night she lay in bed, eyes wide open, breath shallow. She remembered her stage, her ribbon, the applause, the words he used to destroy it all. She wanted to scream, but she didn't. She couldn't. Not yet. When she turned 13, her school held another talent show. Jasmine entered and invited Emily to watch. Emily declined with a shake of her head. But she snuck in anyway, standing in the hallway near the gym doors. She watched Jasmine sing, the same song Emily once sang. Tears spilled down her cheeks. It felt like watching her past come to life. Beautiful, painful, and out of reach. Jasmine saw her in the crowd, gave her a smile, and Emily smiled back. Later that night, she found one of her old notebooks buried deep in her closet. Dusty, worn, filled with scribbled lyrics and childish dreams. She opened it and read the first page. "I want to sing so loud, even the stars stop to listen." Her hand trembled. Then she picked up a pen, and for the first time in years, she wrote a new song, but still, she didn't speak. Not yet. The silence wasn't just a habit anymore. It was her identity, her shield, her curse. And it was killing her slowly. If Emily's story is touching something deep inside you, take a moment, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice could echo in someone else's silence. Sometimes healing begins when we realize we're not alone. What would you have done in her place? It started with a book. One afternoon, while Emily was packing her bag after class, Miss Blake approached her quietly. She held out a small, worn paperback. "You might like this," she said, placing it gently on Emily's desk. The title was simple, "The Courage to Speak." Emily didn't react at first, but she slipped it into her backpack without looking up. That night, under the covers with a flashlight, she opened the first page. Inside the cover, there was a handwritten note. "Your voice isn't gone. It's just waiting for the right moment. DB." Emily's chest tightened. She read the first chapter, then the second. It wasn't a story about someone like her, not exactly, but it was about fear, about someone who lost their voice, literally and emotionally, and had to claw their way back to it. Emily saw herself in every sentence like someone had reached inside her silence and translated it into words. She didn't sleep much that night. The next day she started writing again. Not songs, not yet. Just thoughts, fragments of feelings, questions she didn't know how to ask. Who am I if I can't be loud? What if my voice breaks everything again? Do I even want to be heard? She didn't show the pages to anyone, but she wrote every night. Jasmine noticed the change. "You seem lighter," she signed one afternoon. Emily didn't respond, but she smiled. The next turning point came a week later. Emily passed by the music room and paused at the door. A piano played softly inside. She leaned in, drawn by the sound. A substitute teacher was rehearsing alone. Without thinking, Emily stepped inside and sat quietly in the back. The teacher didn't notice her at first, but eventually looked up. "You like music?" Emily nodded slowly. He smiled. "Want to try?" She froze. He waited. She shook her head. "Okay," he said gently. "Maybe next time." That night, Emily pulled out her old notebook again. She flipped to the back and began writing lyrics. Her hands moved fast, almost frantic, like the words had been waiting inside her all along. She wasn't ready to sing them yet, but she was ready to remember them. She was starting to believe she still had a voice. It wasn't gone, it was buried. And now, slowly, Emily was digging it back up. It began with a nod. One morning, Jasmine waved at Emily across the cafeteria, as she always did. But this time, instead of her usual shy smile, Emily raised her hand and waved back. A small gesture, but for her, it felt monumental. Jasmine lit up. She walked over and sat beside her. She didn't ask questions. She just sat there, signing a few words here and there, making jokes with exaggerated facial expressions, drawing cartoon animals in her notebook. Emily chuckled silently. Then, without fully thinking, she picked up her pen and wrote, "That cat looks like Mr. Hale." Jasmine burst out laughing. From that moment, something shifted. Emily started responding more, writing, nodding, reacting. It was cautious, tentative, but real. Her walls weren't down, but there were cracks, and through those cracks, something was growing. At school, Miss Blake noticed too. She never pushed, never pried, but she made space, left books on Emily's desk with post-its that read, "Thought of you." She offered extra art time during lunch, a place where Emily could be, not just exist. Emily started spending time in the music room during free periods. She didn't sing, but she sat near the piano, sometimes humming quietly when no one was around. She'd place her hand on the wood, feeling the vibration of the notes. It wasn't sound, it was presence. She found a strange comfort there. At home, things were more complicated. Richard's suspicions had begun to creep back in. He'd slam doors, drop objects, raise his voice suddenly, testing her reactions. Emily learned to mask her instincts. She trained herself to stay still, to not flinch, to be unreadable. It was exhausting, but necessary. Lydia remained distant but observant. Emily often wondered if her mother knew, if she had always known, but she never asked. Neither of them did. One evening, Jasmine gave Emily a small wrapped box. "For you," she signed. Inside was a pair of earbuds and a tiny music player, already loaded with songs, old pop, soft rock, a few instrumentals. Emily's hands shook. She put them in that night, lying under the blankets, pressing play. Music filled her again. She didn't cry, not at first. She just closed her eyes and listened. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope. Her silence was no longer just a shield. It was becoming a bridge. The hope didn't come without fear. As Emily started opening up more at school, the weight of pretending at home grew heavier. Richard had become sharper, more alert. He'd clap loudly behind her or call her name unexpectedly. Each time, Emily kept her face blank, her body still. But the cracks in her act were starting to show. One night he dropped a glass in the kitchen. The crash was sudden, loud. Reflexively, Emily turned her head toward the sound. Richard's eyes narrowed. He said nothing, but she felt it. He knew. The next day at school, she was quiet again. Jasmine noticed. "What's wrong?" she signed. Emily hesitated, then scribbled, "He suspects." Jasmine's face fell. She signed slowly, firmly. "You don't have to do this alone." That afternoon, Emily took her biggest risk yet. She wrote a letter to Ms. Blake. It was short, raw, honest. "I can hear. I always could. I only stopped listening so I wouldn't break." She handed it to Ms. Blake before running off, heart pounding so loudly she thought it might betray her secret. The next morning, Ms. Blake met her at the classroom door. She didn't say anything, just placed a hand gently on Emily's shoulder. Then she whispered, Thank you. That same week, a counselor from the school district came in to meet with Emily. They didn't push. They asked yes or no questions. They let her write when she couldn't speak. It wasn't an interrogation, it was an invitation. Emily started to feel like maybe the truth didn't have to destroy her. But the fear of what Richard might do if he found out, if the truth reached him before she was ready, kept her up at night. Still, something in her had changed. She began documenting everything. Journals, letters, memories. She wrote pages of songs she hadn't dared think about for years. Some were angry, others were soft. All of them were real. One afternoon, as she sat in the music room, she started singing, quietly, almost whispering. No one was around. She sang one of her own songs, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a fraud. She felt like Emily again. There were still obstacles ahead, but now she had allies. She had Jasmine, she had Ms. Blake, and more than anything, she had her voice, and this time she wasn't giving it up. The day Emily was called into the principal's office, she knew something had changed. Miss Blake was there, along with the school counselor and a woman Emily hadn't met before, an official from Child Protective Services. Her palms sweated as she sat down, but no one was angry. No one raised their voice. They asked gentle questions about her home, about Richard, about the silence. Emily didn't speak. She couldn't. But she handed over the notebook she'd been writing in for weeks. Pages filled with thoughts, songs, and truths too heavy to say out loud. The woman read for several minutes. Then she looked up at Emily and said, "You're brave." The next day, Lydia picked her up from school. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. There were officers at the house when they arrived. Richard stood on the porch, arms crossed, fury boiling beneath his skin. He didn't resist, but his eyes found Emily's. "You lied to me," he hissed. Emily said nothing. She didn't need to. He was taken away that afternoon. The silence in the house afterward wasn't heavy. It was clean, free. But the weight of years didn't disappear overnight. There were hearings, interviews, evaluations. Emily was assigned a trauma specialist. She was encouraged to speak, but no one forced her, until the day of the court hearing. She was 16 now, almost grown. But when she walked into that courtroom, she felt like the same 8-year-old girl who had made a choice to stop listening. Lydia sat beside her, nervous but supportive. Across the room, Richard sat in silence, stone-faced. The judge called Emily to the stand. She rose, walked slowly, heart thundering in her chest. She sat, adjusted the microphone. There was a pause. The judge asked if she wanted to speak. She looked at him. Then she turned her gaze to Richard. And then, finally, she spoke. "I'm not deaf." Her voice cracked. It was dry, unfamiliar, but it was hers. I never was. I just couldn't hear him anymore. His words, they hurt more than anything. So I stopped listening. I stopped talking because that was the only way I knew how to stay safe. The courtroom was silent. I heard every insult, every door slam, every cruel whisper. I heard my mom crying. I heard myself begging for it to stop. And I heard the silence afterward, the silence that swallowed everything. She paused, eyes full of tears. "But I'm done being quiet." Lydia covered her mouth, sobbing softly. "I want to live. I want to sing again. I want to speak without being afraid." The judge nodded slowly. "Thank you, Emily." Afterward, outside the courtroom, reporters waited. Emily ignored them all. She just stood with Lydia and Ms. Blake, holding both their hands. Later that week, the school hosted a small event, a student showcase, open mic style. Emily hadn't signed up, but she showed up. Jasmine met her near the stage. "You're here," she signed, grinning. Emily nodded. Then slowly she walked up. She stood before the mic. The room fell silent. Her eyes scanned the crowd. She saw her counselor, Ms. Blake, Jasmine, Lydia. She opened her mouth and sang. It wasn't perfect. Her voice trembled, cracked in places, but it carried weight, truth, heart. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Emily smiled, not just with her mouth, with her whole being. She had found her voice again, and this time It was hers to keep. Emily learned that silence can be both a prison and a shield. For 8 years, she lived behind a wall of quiet that no one could break, not because she couldn't hear, but because she couldn't bear to listen. Her silence was never weakness. It was survival, and for a long time, it was the only thing that kept her spirit from shattering completely. But what she never expected was that the silence, once her refuge, could also become her greatest burden. It swallowed her voice, her identity, and her joy. It kept her safe from pain, but it also kept her from healing. When she finally spoke, when she sang, it wasn't just a sound, it was resistance, a declaration, a rebirth. Emily's story isn't just about trauma, it's about endurance, about finding strength in the most unexpected place, within herself. She realized that being heard isn't always about volume. Sometimes it's about truth, about having the courage to speak, even if your voice trembles, even if it's been buried for years. She learned that healing takes time, but it begins with one brave word, and that sometimes the softest voices carry the loudest truths. Today, Emily Saunders is no longer silent. She didn't become a pop star or chase the spotlight. Instead, she found purpose in quieter places, schools, shelters, community centers, places where other girls sit in silence, just like she once did. She became a youth advocate, speaking to students and educators about emotional abuse, about invisible wounds, about the power of listening, really listening, to what children aren't saying. Her story became a bridge for others who didn't know how to tell theirs. She teaches workshops on expression through writing and music, helping young people find safe ways to release what's locked inside. Her sessions aren't loud, but they are powerful. She lets them write before they speak, sing before they explain, cry before they perform, and when they do speak, she listens. Sometimes a girl will come up to her after and whisper, "That's my story too." Emily always smiles. "I know," she says. "You're not alone." Lydia now volunteers at a local crisis center, helping women rebuild their lives. She and Emily are healing, together, slowly, honestly. The silence no longer defines them. Their legacy isn't just survival, it's breaking the cycle, one voice at a time. What would you do if silence was the only thing keeping you safe? Emily's story isn't just hers. It echoes in the lives of so many who suffer quietly, afraid that their truth will bring more pain than peace. But her journey shows us that even the deepest silence can be broken. That one voice, no matter how long it's been hidden, can change everything. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like your voice didn't matter? Have you ever stayed quiet to protect yourself or someone else? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your words might be the sign someone else is waiting for. Maybe today you can help someone break their silence too. If this story moved you, leave a like, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with someone who needs to know they're not alone. Because every voice deserves to be heard, even the quiet ones, especially the quiet ones.